Hello everyone, my name is Paul, and if you could see the PowerPoint, you could also see that I also go by Kennycomics, which you may be familiar with, a editor or possibly a music person. And on the presentation, it also says a creator because I also started as a canvas creator before I was an editor. So I was able to come up with some of these elements during my days at Canvas and also working with a lot of talented creators on Webtoon. So I was hoping to share them with you so that it may also help you as you create your comic and continue on your journey of telling your own stories. Working at Webtoon, I was fortunate so many talented creators, including the people and titles that you see here and more. And as a person who started as a canvas creator, I was able to learn different process and different types of methods, and also some of the things that I learned during my canvas years. So I think that all of those things were resulting in a pretty interesting research and like knowledge, forms of knowledge that allow me to help even more on Canvas and Originals. So I'll be focusing on tips that may help a Canvas creator, and we'll try to begin right away. The reason I mentioned that I used to be a Canvas creator is that because I know that creating comic is very difficult. It takes a lot of time and effort, and as you all know, it's a lot of trial and error, and also like having a struggle versus art and labor and such. So I wanted to categorize the works that you'll be doing while creating online comic or just comic in general into where the key element, if there's one point that I hope that helps you today, is that by having more control over your, it really allows you to help yourself on being able to save time and energy, and it allows you to also get closer to your goals because you are able to save time and energy. In terms of having more control over your processes, here are two key methods that I think are extremely essential on a just making comic on their own or people who are making comics professionally. Where one of them is called art prepping. I don't think it's an actual, but it's something that I coined so that it's a easy way to explain. And also making shortcuts your best friend. And while the second part seems like a very common tip and something that on a daily basis, it really depends on how much you're able to make shortcuts your best friend. It creates a lot of difference in terms of like how much time you're able to save and how efficient you are, and how you are able to also compete and like thrive as you are working on a professional level, from what I have seen. Okay, so I'll be explaining the concept of art prepping, where it's about having your materials prepared for the action. So when you're making comics, there are different processes and everybody has their own unique way of doing things. But I like to categorize it as one, creative process, and two, labor. And depending on who you are and how you work, you'll enjoy one of these or both of these, or have trouble with both of these. So the part that I am focusing on today is trying to optimize and work with the labor part of the comic making, and trying to make that process into a more efficient process so that it is able to help you as you create your comics. So what does it mean to do an art prepping? So this is prepping is a food term, or specifically like what they do in restaurants, where if you're trying to, let's say you are trying to cook a meal and you have the instructions. Now, after you have the instructions, you'll try to get the ingredients and find ways to properly cook them by following the instructions correctly. So what happens is that if you have the recipe, and if you get the unprepped ingredient, if you just go into cooking right away after you immediately obtain your unprepped ingredients, what will happen is that you have to handle both the ingredient handling and cooking at the same time as you cook. So instead of able to prepare yourself ahead of time, if you decide to jump in without having the ingredients unpacked, prepared, or at least like organized in some ways, then you'll have a little bit more difficulty as you try to get into the action, which is a cooking. If you're able to have some prep ingredients in a more prep manner, such as like having some things chopped or at least having the packages open, then in some ways you'll be able to concentrate on cooking part of the cooking instead of like preparing as you are cooking. So that's that's one of the concepts that I think that helps a lot of creators when they are making a lot of panels instead of just one piece of artwork, because when you have to work on a comic, you would need more than one panel usually, but I know there are one panel comics. But what would happen is that overall, if you are in the process of creating multiple panels and multiple sequences and maybe 20, 30, even 40, then sometimes having your materials prepared for the action really helps to make the process more efficient. So that's something that I would suggest to a lot of the creators or artists that I will talk to. And then here's where I'll be quickly going over the shortcut actions. So obviously, I really hope that you guys at least know what Control Z does. It undo or undoes the action that you have made, because you're trying to make for a cleaner or more efficient approaches to what's in your head, to either the screen or on the paper, and the technology advancement of being able to digitally draw on computer devices and other methods that you're using, you're able to benefit from technology and then have more control over your processes. And yes, there's the usual Control C, Control V, and Control Z, or if you are using a Mac, it'll be Command C, Command V, and Command Z. But little did I know when I was making comics back in Canvas, there are a lot more shortcuts and like methods that could really help to save your time. And each action you perform ideally should be done in an optimized way, and little seconds by seconds adds up to minute by minute, and it eventually could add into hours and hours. And this is from the Clip Studio main site. But in terms of using the shortcut key, being able to have more control of your process and being practical, and it really allows you to save time instead of going into the actual option of doing undo. So without Control Z, normally on Photoshop or Clip Studio, some things that you have to do in order to undo an action would be to go to the taskbar, press Edit, and press undo, which would take you at least three more mouse clicks or more time, whereas you could Control Z and it will be done in an instant. On top of being a quicker form of doing actions, if you're able to work with shortcut, it allows you for a more focused approach on the labor side, where technically, if you're able to have more understanding of like what you're doing and all the shortcuts, it allows you to concentrate and keep concentrating. I know that as you're drawing, and if you need to get water, or if you need to go to the restroom, or if your cat gets on your lap, your concentrations could definitely break as it goes, and most of the time you're able to get back to it right away, but sometimes it could slow down your process just by a bit. And if that happens more and more, sometimes that could add up to seconds, minutes, and hours. But by having more control over what you do, you are allowed to concentrate on what you're doing, and it's able to give you a more efficient way of being able to finish and being able to work on the labor part of making comics. One thing that I would personally suggest as a practice, or like something you should do, would be to try investing 3 or 5 days, or you could just do it in like 3-hour period on one day, where you try to learn and go over some of the more useful shortcuts and tips on either online or in some of the tips and like tutorials. But also, like if there's like a function that you use often, then try to find ways to see if there are quicker or more efficient way of doing it. And I know that some software such as Clip Studio is able to assign shortcuts. So I think that's something that you could explore as well. And while this seems like a minimal detail and some things that doesn't seem to create like a groundbreaking difference, but you'll be surprised at how much it's able to make that difference. And as a matter of fact, some of these elements are what a lot of professional creators are able to use when they are making on a weekly basis or monthly basis, depending on what they're working on. So I would really suggest you to try this out if you can. Here's an example I personally made just so that I am able to illustrate some of these points. So in terms of like art prepping, I would suggest you to create a personalized version of base color palette, which either could be a color palette that looks like regular color, or making a color map, or making a character model with minor color, like without like boundaries, so you're able to get the color right away and apply it to base color. And this is something that a lot of creators do as well. And having like special effects, which would take you about 5, 10, even 20 or 30 minutes, if you're able to find some of these special effects assets that you're able to use right away, then that would be also another time save for you as well. And auto actions is not something that I used often when I was making comics on my own, but now that I'm editing and working with creators, that I am actively encouraging, where you are able to record a action that you use often and just be able to press the action button and is able to replicate that action as it is. So I think basically finding faster ways to do what you're already doing also applies here. And shortcut key is something that I went over. Here's a little sample panel I made for this. And this is a sample panel where this little character, Kennycomics character, is very happy that he has saved some time. Now, in order for me to make this panel, I would have to, well, make a sketch, but I actually didn't make a sketch for this. So line art, there will be the base color, and there will be shading, and there will be the panel, the rectangle drawing, and zoom line all applied as one. So each of these processes would take respectively a different amount of time. And ideally, I think all creators could agree with me on this. I wish I could just wish a drawing onto a board or digital board whatsoever. So I wish I could just wish drawings into existence, because I think they'll be able to save me a lot of time, and it could help me to concentrate on other things in terms of like when I'm making comics, being able to make longer chapters or like do more comic stories with different types of approaches. But because that technology hasn't been invented yet, unfortunately, there's the usual process of these digital art being combined. And if you're able to try saving, like cutting off some of the edges in terms of like timings, where you're able to save 5 to 10 seconds on each process, and then you may be able to take off minutes, and those will really help you to see how much it actually helps you. I think on average, some creators were able to save around 10% to sometimes 15 or possibly 20, but that depends on like their initial approach, because I saw some creators who are these wonderful artists who were not able to have the most of the optimized, so that really got in the way of them being able to continue to like work on a sustainable pace. But after they learned about the shortcuts and other layer options, it really was able to help them out. So line art, there's like a lot of different ways, and there's also a lot of different method techniques and even softwares to help you. And ideally, some of the examples of possible time-saving solutions could include Line Art Stabilizer, where it's a software where it allows you or helps you to draw a more sustainable and stable line. While it could like slow you down a little bit, but sometimes it's better to be able to draw a line at one stroke rather than like 10 strokes. That still happens, but if you're able to find ways to make the trial and error into fewer steps, then it really allows to help you. And if you're able to work on a faster computer and like layer options, there's also vector line layers that you could work to do line adjusting for. In terms of prepping for the base coloring, some of the possible time-saving options are having a base color palette prepared, which is something that I showed. And there's also the negative space selection methods and some other base coloring methods where you could find like tutorials for online. Doing base color, yeah, it takes a lot of work, but I think in terms of doing the base color of a, let's say, a line comic, it doesn't require as much as I would say critical thinking, but it's closer to doing process that is by using a tool, and like a tool that has the right settings. So because of that, I think having a efficient approach in base coloring, including many various effects and many various methods of tackling this subject, I think it really helps out to make the most out of your time. And this is something that I always talk to my creators about. I'm very sorry, there seems to be a honking noise outside. So shading, there's a lot of different ways, and in terms of like how some webtoons or how some digital arts are made, basically also having a shade color palette is also helpful if you're coloring multicolors. And sometimes if you're able to work with single shading, you could also use the multiply layer method where you're able to find a good color to serve as a base shading color and then use more masking layer to add color to it if needed. So, and sometimes there's instead of the light to dark, there's the dark to light shading method if it fits the situation. And also there are design choices that allows you to minimize the need of shading, but that depends on your color and like art style. So I'll skip that for now. Quick little example. Left, if you could see the zoom lines, I made those zoom lines with my crude brushes without the line stabilizers. And it took me about a minute to just do it slowly, where because I didn't do it with stabilizer or too many methods or like these tools, it doesn't look as great. I didn't purposely make this look bad, but like that's how it came out. So, and also because I have to move my wrist a lot, doing this on a regular basis would not be the best possible option for me. And here is a zoom line asset that I was able to apply, which took me about technically 5 to 8 seconds to just paste, but I was also adjusting like how the zoom line is going to be applied. So I would say it's 15 seconds. So in this process where I was trying to add a zoom line to a picture, it helped me to save about 45 seconds. But if I was a little faster on my own zoom line, let's say 30 seconds. So seemingly that's not that much, but let's put it this way. I know that a zoom line doesn't go into every single panel, but let's say there is something that goes into a lot of these panel coloring, base coloring and line. And if you were able to save about, let's say, 45 seconds per panel on one of these processes, just on zoom line alone, that would be, if you had to draw, let's say 20 panels, that would be about 15 minutes saved. And it could multiply as you go on. And as you do something like this for all of your processes, it really is able to add up little by little, giving you a little bit more control. And as that increases, it is able to give you a lot more control than you would think over your own process by saving more time, either having more energy or either being able to work on a part of the panel that you would like to work on more, or being able to just focus on like what you want to focus on as you're creating the comic or the chapter. These are just few of the examples that I'm sharing based on my experience and some of the things that I saw from these wonderful creators I was fortunate enough to work with. And I would also encourage you to find your own process of gaining more control over your process, because it really helps you to really helps you to save time and energy. And also, like as you save these time and energy, you're able to either brainstorm more, or you're able to get some rest, or you're able to find more time to focus on some of the things that you want to focus on. And I've seen it really help some creators to reach their goals, and I really hope that this helps you as well. So that's my advice from a former Canvas creator turned editor, and I hope that this session was worth your time. So thank you very much, and I'll be now taking some questions.
I think everyone's super excited that they got to see some of the artists that you've worked with and like the webtoons that you've worked with. So like Paul mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to let us know in the chat. There's about 8 minutes left of this session, so we'll try to take as many as possible. Okay, we do have one question. What is the benefit of vector lines?
Okay, so vector lines, if your computer and if your memory is able to handle it, first of all, if you have vector lines, it allows you to have more basically control over your lines, where you'll be able to control its width, length, and sometimes shape. And normally when you do that on normal lines, as you change either size or like the width of it, it will usually pixelate and start to lose its quality. But for vector lines, you don't have to worry about that, where you could infinitely zoom in almost, depending on like how you handle it. But overall, vector line allows you to like adjust and work with the lines in ways that you would.
Nice. We have another question about colors. So, do you have any tips for simplifying color palettes so coloring is more manageable?
Okay, so in a lot of cases, I think there are in a lot of the webtoons and some of the one of the best resources in regards to if you're trying to save time would be to look at some webtoons which has been running for a long time at a quality that you feel like is relatively high quality. If you're trying to find a good way to save time, look at those titles and try to see what they were able to do. Some of the things that I was able to notice from some titles that has been running for more than 5 years is one, they will try to utilize design elements so that it's able to help them to save time on coloring. One of the examples is creating a simpler but more striking design so that the simpler color palette doesn't seem to distract audiences into thinking the character looks boring, but with a certain highlight and design choices, it's able to add a lot more than you would think. And the other is if you're able to find a way to really mix some of the colors with like some of the, I think, base colors in terms of how you work with some. So sometimes using similar color schemes in like two parts of the the characters, I think does help. I think some of the good choices that you could consider looking at would be Noblesse, God of High School, and also recently Omniscient Reader. So because those being action comics with a lot of characters, they have to find ways to take a optimized approach in how they do base colorings and like choosing colors. So I think that would be a good reference for you. But if you have your own favorite comics, you could also look at those as well.
Nice. Another question. Do you encourage copy and pasting of panels?
I think like with yes, I do, but with some caveats.
Mm.
So just like in like films or like animations, I think you like copying and pasting panels like with the right approach really does help out with both the production and sometimes the storytelling. If you look at some of the titles and some of the works that have been done, what you would notice is that sometimes like similar panels could repeat, but also sometimes you could create a subtle differences in how some characters react to a certain thing. So by adding some variety to some of those panels, you're able to really highlight the emotions and highlight the moments in ways that would really bring out those moments in ways that you would normally not able to do with like non-repeating panels. But overall, I would suggest using them, but also using them with storytelling skills and some composition skills if possible. So you're able to create some variety by adding some more energy or some atmosphere into them. So try to read your favorite comics and see how they're able to utilize those techniques, and you'll be able to see how you'll be able to take up.
A popular one I'm seeing in the chat is backgrounds. Do people really notice them? Should creators invest more time in making backgrounds for their series?
Yes, and also like I think in a way that helps your process to be efficient. Where I think if you're able to find ways to save time on background, I think you should definitely be encouraged to use them. And if you overall, I think there is a balance between how you would see those backgrounds versus how the readers would see those backgrounds. So if you have like references or like friends who are readers, then you could try to ask them about some of the things that you find interesting versus like what they find interesting. And in a lot of cases, they'll let you know like in terms of like about the drawings and like how you would approach these drawings will be different than how they would be viewing these things. So if you have a good understanding and balance between that, then yes, I would suggest finding some time-saving tips for some of the backgrounds. And I think that is something that is done in a lot of video games and a lot of the animations as well. So if you think that if you believe that your title functions as a character at the forefront, then I think that's something that you could explore as well.
Nice. So we have about less than 2 minutes left of this workshop. Paul, did you have any last minute advice or things that you wanted to say to everyone that's here?
Yes, I do actually. So I'm seeing a lot of wonderful questions, and I would personally like to answer them all. But with the time I do have, currently I do want to, thank you for all your hard work just in general. I know how difficult comic creating can be. And I hope that you're able to achieve your goals, whichever they may be. And I do hope that this was a very short session, which took about, I do believe, about 30 minutes. But if it was able to help you save, I would say, at least 1 minute of your process or more, that would be great. And I hope you are able to continue on your path. And I wish you all good luck.